All right, what did we experience yesterday there at the Old Trafford when Manchester United faced off against Lyon? Where you talk about another great night in front of that's Manchester United faithfuls. 5-4 was the result at the end of 120 minutes yesterday. We were the heroes for Manchester United. You mentioned Casemiro, you mentioned Harry Maguire. Well, definitely also there has been that conversation. If not for the presence of Bruno Fernandes within the Manchester United Football Club, where would they be? Well, of course, we talk about some other greater results of games that went down yesterday across different centers. Yesterday in the UEFA Europa League, Bodo Glimt, they are in the next round. Also of the UEFA Europa League, that's talking about Bodo Glimt. There in the UEFA Europa League. Well, they defeated Lazio on penalty shootout yesterday, and of course, it was a great victory for themselves. But I'll tell you that all the English sides that were left in the UEFA competitions, Europa and also Europa Conference League yesterday, they made it through into the next round. As Tottenham Football Club also defeated Eintracht Frankfurt by a goal to nil, and also that was the first time in a year that Frankfurt didn't score in front of our home fans. And for Chelsea Football Club, despite losing at the Stamford Bridge yesterday, well, they advanced into the next round of the UEFA Europa Conference League. That's talking about these semi-finals. Well, of course, you know you're listening to the voice of 𝐿 SAMIES 𝐂𝐿𝐒𝐄𝐑 the program this lovely Friday morning, not afternoon. Well, definitely how quickly I want the day to unwind. But I'll tell you that we have lots of interesting stories, which definitely would go back to talk about some tennis stories also on the show this lovely morning. And then we'll talk about local football on the show as regards the Under-20 African Cup of Nations. But you know you're listening to the voice of 𝐿 SAMIES 𝐂𝐿𝐒𝐄𝐑 once again. And of course, we join our partners, the BBC, to take a listen to what they have for us on that front of the BBC Premier League update. The BBC Premier League update.
BBC Premier League update from the home of Premier League football.
Hello, I'm Paul Serres at the BBC Sports Centre. Manchester United are through to the semi-finals of the Europa League after a dramatic night at Old Trafford. United were taken to extra time by 10-man Lyon with the tie all square at 4-4. Following another 2-2 draw between the sides. Goals from Ryan Cherki and Alexandre Lacazette seemed to take the tie away from United, only for Bruno Fernandes, Kobbie Mainoo and Harry Maguire to fire them into the semi-finals, 5-4 on the night and 7-6 on aggregate. Elsewhere, Tottenham will face the Norwegian champions Bodo Glimt in the last four after a Dominic Solanke penalty gave them a 1-0 win over Eintracht Frankfurt in Germany and a 2-1 aggregate victory. Chelsea are through to the semi-finals of the Europa Conference League despite being beaten 2-1 on the night by Legia Warsaw at Stamford Bridge. They qualified 4-2 over the two matches. The Liverpool captain Virgil van Dijk has signed a new contract to extend his time at the club for another 2 years. The Dutchman has been at Anfield since 2018 and has helped the Reds win the English Premier League, the Champions League and the FA Cup. The former Liverpool goalkeeper Chris Kirkland says it's a great deal for everyone and that Van Dijk still has plenty to offer, even at the age of 33.
Virgil reads the game so well, and listen, if you've seen him in one-on-one sprints with people, it doesn't get done very, very often at all. He's an outstanding player, but he's reading of the game as well. But it's not just that, it's what he brings to the whole team. He leads from the front, leads from the back. You can tell people around him that play with him look up to him. They look to him for guidance, for strength. He'll do that. He's great around the place. He's great with the young players. He demands, as you need to do. He demands, but I think he demands in the right way.
And for more football news from the BBC, go to bbc.com/football.
BBC Premier League update from the home of Premier League football.
All right, still talking about a bit of European football. Quick results. A look at the results of the games. Atletico de Bilbao, they defeated Rangers 2-0 yesterday. And like I said, Tottenham Hotspur defeated Eintracht Frankfurt by a goal to nil. Lazio, well, despite defeating Bodo Glimt 2-0 after extra time and penalty shootout, they lost by 3-2 to the hands of Bodo Glimt. And for Bodo Glimt, well, they are in their maiden semi-finals of a European competition. And with that 9-goal thriller we saw at the Old Trafford, well, it was a madness. Well, I dare say that. Manchester United 5, Lyon 4. But we'll come later in the afternoon and talk about, bottling games, bottling leads. Because Manchester United in this game, they had a 2-goal lead and they bottled it. But towards the end of the game for Lyon, they had a 3-goal lead and they bottled it. So we'll talk about that when we come later in the afternoon. But in the Europa Conference League also, from the games that went down yesterday, that's talking about the quarterfinals of the games that went down yesterday in the Europa Conference League as well. Well, I'll tell you that for Chelsea Football Club, well, they lost at the bridge by 2-1 to the hands of Lega Warsaw. Jogegren also defeated SK Rapid, that's by 4-1. And of course, they qualified also after extra time. And then we talk about Real Betis 1-1 against the Jagiellonia, but qualified on an aggregate scoreline. And Fiorentina also playing out a 2-2 draw against Celje. They qualified on an aggregate scoreline. But we move away from that also and talk about some other sporting stories outside of football on the show this lovely morning. And definitely it's about tennis, where Rafa Nadal is set to be honored in a ceremony at this year's French Open. That's according to the tournament director Amelie Murasemo, the Spanish great who retired in November. He won 14 of the 22 Grand Slam titles at the Roland Garros. Remember, you know why they call him the king of play. And no other player has won as many singles titles at one Grand Slam event as Rafael Nadal at the French Open. And the 38-year-old claimed his first Grand Slam title in the year 2000. His final, Grand Slam title in the year 2022. Well, still talking about some tennis stories on the show this lovely Friday morning. Top seed Carlos Alcaraz, he is into the quarterfinals of the Barcelona Open with a straight set victory over Laslo Djere. Spanish world number 2. That's Carlos Alcaraz, who triumphed at the Monte Carlo Masters last week. He won by 6-2, 6-4 against the SAMIES unseeded Djere. And Alcaraz won the first 5 games and produced 8 unanswered winners in a dominant first set. But then the 21-year-old, that's talking about Alcaraz, will play against the 5th seed Alex de Minaur in the last 8 later tomorrow. And of course, later today rather, I beg your pardon. But we talk about some other results that went down in the Barcelona Open. Alejandro Davidovic Fokina he defeated world number 8 and Rublev 7-5, 6-4 to reach the Barcelona Open quarterfinals. Ranked 38, he had never beaten the Russian before, but triumphed at the 6th time of asking there in straight set. And still talking about tennis in the female category now, that's informed teenager Mira Andreeva. She is out of the Stuttgart Open as she lost in straight set to that's Ekaterina Alexandrova in the last 16. 6-3, 6-2. She lost against the unseeded Alexandrova in just over an hour. Also, I tell you that Jasmine Paolini defeated Julian Nemea 6-1, 7-5 to reach the last 8 for a second successive year, and she is set to play against American 4th seed 𝐶𝐈𝐒 after she cruised past Ella Sedel. That's 6-1, 6-1 in 57 minutes. While Arina Sabalenka will play that's Belgian Elise Martins in the quarterfinals, and Anastasia Potapova withdrew before the last 16 match with an injury. But away from that, also let's discuss about a bit of football stories. Just as in England, where we have 5 teams set to qualify for the UEFA Champions League this season. Well, I tell you that in Spain also, that's in the Spanish La Liga, they will have 5 teams in the UEFA Champions League for next season. Well, why is this so? La Liga will join the Premier League in having 5 teams in the Champions League next season after it secured the second of the extra places for performance by clubs across the 3 European competition. And the 2 leagues are rewarded with a European Performance Sports, that's EPS, which was introduced last season as part of revamp to the expanded Champions League to a 36-team competition. And England has been well out in front all season and confirmed it will get an additional spot on April 8th. Spain also were guaranteed a top 2 finish yesterday following Lazio's elimination from the UEFA Europa League, while Atletico Bilbao they defeated Rangers. All right, beat to Nigerian football at this point. Head coach Ali Zubairu of the under 20 African team. Of course, he has called up a few players to be within the setup of this side. We had the 7-time African champions and 2-time World Cup runners-up with the path the shots of Nigeria. That's for Egypt later this weekend, where they expected to play a couple of friendly matches before the opening match of the competition against Tunisia in Cairo. That's on May 1st. But the head coach Ali Zubairu has selected first-choice goalkeeper 𝐒𝐈𒂃, defender and captain Daniel Bameyi, midfielder Suleiman Alabi Jojo, and the forward Okpoboro Arieyi amongst that's a squad of 24 for this year's African Under-20 Cup of Nations taking place in Egypt. So defenders Adamu Maigari and Emmanuel Chukwu, who are based in Germany, midfielders Caleb Uchedike based in Croatia, and Simon Kletus, and forwards are Clayton Jepta, Divine Olise, and Precious Benjamin, who are based in Germany, where the players are called up by the manager, talking about that's Ali Zubairu. But let's cross our fingers and expect or see how this goes down for the head coach of the Under-20 African Cup of Nations side. If they can add to their 7 medal all, maybe they can get something else. But then we move away from that also and discuss a bit of basketball stories, where of course games went down. The games are set to go down in the early hours of tomorrow. That's in the play-in tournament. We would have the Atlanta Hawks facing the Miami Heat, and then the Memphis Grizzlies against the Dallas Mavericks. But then we have games set to go down later today across different centers, just to build up to everything we expect. That's later this weekend. Well, in the African Cup of Nations semi-finals, Africa will be up against Burkina Faso. In France, we have Rennes against Nantes. In Spain, Espanyol will be up against the Getafe. That's talking about the Spanish La Liga. But then we'll come later in the afternoon and discuss more about stories. That's the build-up to the games we are expected to experience this weekend. And of course, a review of what happened. That was last night in the UEFA Europa League and also the Europa Conference League. I'm SAMIES, your sports captain. Coming